I'm so excited to have a conversation because I think a lot of parents want to raise bilingual kids. But even like me, I'm like, am I doing it right? Am I going to confuse my child? Like, is this the best thing for them?
Yeah.
And so I wanted to have a conversation with an expert to kind of understand, like, what does that science actually say? And like, how should we actually approach it?
Yeah.
So very excited to have you here. Like, would love to hear about you and your background before we get into questions.
Yeah, of course. So my name is Joanne Cazeau. I'm a pediatric speech language pathologist. My area of brilliance and really the clients that I support best are babies and toddlers and also preschoolers who are late talkers or late to show some expressive and receptive communication milestones. And I support them through
Mm.
play. So my practice and my approach is very play-based because children really under 5 learn best through play. And I love to say that play is the occupation of the child. And then also my practice is
Mm.
very child-led. So really whatever the child is, loving or navigating towards or interested in, I use those interests to be able to support their goals in speech, language, and development. And also I'm a private practice owner, so I see clients in person in New Jersey, but I really support families globally via, video consultations and connecting with them online on my online platform.
I love it. What's your online platform?
Yeah, so on Instagram, I am at Beyond Babbles. That's where I share really tips and tricks with families to help support their child's communication journey, but also debunking a lot of myths about bilingualism, non-speaking children using AAC, which is an alternative form of communication. So on that platform, Beyond
Mm.
Babbles is where I really connect with families all over the globe. And then at Cozy Speech Therapy on Instagram is mostly where I connect with my community in New Jersey and then also my clients here in New Jersey.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Okay, let's get into this. You clearly know what you're talking about. So, I think first, like, how should we actually define bilingualism in early childhood?
Yeah. So bilingualism is really when children learn and know how to use two languages. And then there's multilingualism, which is when they
Mm.
learn, understand, and know how to use more than two languages. And in early childhood, we're really looking for the child to have an understanding of what that word means. They can use the word on their own and they can use it in various contexts.
Mm. And
Yeah.
that's great, but I think there's a lot of I guess, like, the biggest fear for any parent,
hmm
including myself, is, does raising my child bilingual cause any delays in
So
their language
Yeah.
development?
So unfortunately, I feel like this myth has been really persistent and pervasive even when I was a child, because this is something that was told to my parents too. And like, I'm not a spring chicken, so
Mm.
it's been many decades that this myth has just been kind of persistent in the early development space. But so I just want to be able to say very clearly that that is a myth, right? That has been debunked over and over again. It was a gross misinterpretation of a piece of research from multiple decades ago that has just I feel like once the headline is kind of like in the news, right, it just doesn't go away. And then it's been getting
Yeah.
passed on kind of like as a wives' tale and also being passed on by pediatricians when families ask. So the bottom line is that bilingualism does not cause delays. I think what happens sometimes, right, is that families will think that their child is maybe confused because they're mixing languages, which is called code
Mm.
mixing or code switching. So that sometimes will give some pause to a family. I think the other thing too is when we're looking at bilingual children, it might look like maybe they have fewer words, but we have to look at their total vocabulary. So when we're talking about total
Yeah.
vocabulary, yeah. So when we're talking about total vocabulary, we're talking about the vocabulary that that child has in all of their languages, right? And so I'll give you some examples. I speak French and Haitian Creole, and I speak English, and I am a receptive bilingual in Spanish, so I can give some examples in Spanish. So if you have a 2-year-old child, for example, and they're saying cat, but they're also saying gato, and they're saying dog, and they're also saying pero, we have to count all four of those as words. So that child would have four words
Mm.
versus sometimes
Mm.
there is this, sometimes families would count those words as just being two words. Yeah.
Mm.
So then it looks
Yeah,
like
that's
the child
great.
has less words.
Yeah, that got into my next question, which was like, are they confused if we hear them mixing languages?
Yeah.
Like,
So they're not confused. Mixing
No.
languages is something that adults do. I mean, even in conversation with my
Mm,
parents, I will, also mix English and I'll also mix Haitian Creole. Or I might like throw in a French
me too.
word. Yeah. So it's something
Yeah.
that is a natural part of the bilingualism journey. So code mixing is actually it's a good thing, right? Because it shows us that children have the understanding of what the word means in a specific language. And so they still have a
Mm,
very conceptual, right, grasp of what that word means. And they're able to pull from their different language systems, right? So they don't just kind of
mm,
get stuck and freeze up, but they go, wait, I have access to this word in another language, so I could actually pull it. And code switching actually means that our children are paying attention to who knows what language. Because you'll
mm.
notice a child will not code switch with someone like a English Spanish bilingual child won't code switch with someone who doesn't know Spanish, right? They
Yeah.
will code switch with someone that they know also has access to that vocabulary. So it's actually a really good show of like a good cognitive
Mm.
skill that they know, okay, I can code switch with this person because I know that this person also speaks the other language that I speak.
Yeah, it's so great. It's basically it's not a mistake, it's a skill, which is it's just like a superpower,
Exactly.
bilingualism.
It
It
is
kind
a
of yeah.
superpower. Exactly, exactly, and when you think about it too, like, you don't ever stop code switching, and there isn't really such a thing as being a perfect or balanced bilingual. Even myself, I learned Haitian Creole and French first before I learned English, but then there are some times when I'm speaking Creole or I'm speaking French, I will still pull in some English words just because I know, "Oh, this person speaks both languages, they'll understand what I mean." So code
Mm.
mixing is not something that necessarily goes away. And in a lot of languages, there are words that are borrowed from other languages, right? In English,
Mhm.
there are words that are borrowed from French. Creole, there are words that are borrowed from, this language or like Latin or this. So that we're always kind of pulling words from other languages that we can't quite find. Like in Creole, like fly. There's this new song by Naika where they talk about somebody being fly. That's not a concept that we have in Haitian Creole. And we don't have a word for it, so then we use the word fly because we know what it means, right? It means being stylish, but that's not a word that we have really like a concept of fly. It's an English word that we borrowed, and we're like, we're gonna use that word when we're talking. So, like, code
Mm.
mixing doesn't really go away, adults do it too.
It's true. That has been my own experience as well. I learned
Mhm.
Spanish before I learned the English, and my whole life, depending on who I'm speaking to, if it's my mom, it's just Spanish, but if it's my friends, I know they
Yeah,
speak English, and so we go back
yeah,
and forth in the proverbial Spanglish, that they call it.
yeah,
We just,
Spanglish, yeah,
back and forth and we just
yeah.
talk. So that's actually super helpful to know. One another thing that I thought was interesting so far in my journey raising my child bilingual is that I
Mhm.
noticed it first too with sounds of animals. Like the sounds of the animals in English and in Spanish are different. So, for example,
Yeah,
like for a dog, in Spanish you say wow wow, but in English you say woof
mhm,
woof. And so she
yeah,
learned both. And then
yeah,
I was kind of like counting that as one. But I mean, to your point, that's actually two different like words that she knows that will count
yeah,
as part of her vocabulary. So I think
exactly,
that's so important for a lot of parents to just hear again that if you know, I their vocabulary, your child's vocabulary in one language might appear smaller than their peers that are monolinguals, but when you actually assess both languages, then they're probably going to be at the same level as the monolingual peers, right? Because they're
exactly.
just distributed among the different languages. So is that true that if, for example, if your child's learning three languages, then you should assess their vocabulary across three languages, right? Yeah.
Exactly. So the more languages, as long as they have words in that language, you also count those words. So like if they have words in a third language, then you would also add that. And then I just want to contrast that with so there's total vocabulary, which is these are all the words they have in all their languages, but then there's conceptual vocabulary, which are
Mm,
these are all the concepts that they have in all of their languages. So going
mm.
back to the animals in English and Spanish, we would count cat and gato as two words, but then it would be one total vocabulary.
And is language development measured in the concept or in the words?
And 50 words, we are looking at that total vocabulary, but it's helpful to know
Mm.
what, the conceptual vocabulary is.
Okay. Is there a place where parents should be looking at milestones, like an
Uh,
organization? Yeah, that you recommend?
Yes. Okay. Usually we would say the CDC. And for many years, many decades, we have felt very comfortable as speech language pathologists referring to the CDC.
Okay.
Somehow, some way, somehow, during the pandemic, there was a new set of milestones that were released by the CDC that speech language pathologists don't feel comfortable referring to. We don't feel like it's an accurate kind of display of where children should be by certain, age ranges. Oh, the converse or, contrarily, we would refer to ASHA. So you
Okay.
can check out ASHA's website is asha.org. It's the American Speech, Language, and Hearing Association. So they have
Okay.
some really great milestone information. 0 to 3 is another organization that has some really good milestones information. Pathways has some really good milestones information. I think it's pathways.org. I
Okay.
have some milestones information that I share also on my Instagram account that you can find a link to. And then also any really reputable as like speech and hearing and speech and language and development experts, you can usually find some information that we universally agree on that yes, this is kind of where your child should be. But
Okay.
traditionally we would say the CDC. But there really weren't any speech and language pathologists consulted on their
Mm.
latest release of milestone information, and it's not a document that we agree with.
Okay. Got it. And so just quickly, like, what are some real red flags, like versus things that are like totally normal when you're raising a bilingual child?
Bilingual and multilingual children really follow the same path of development as a child who is monolingual. And so there's nothing about it, on the surface that should be drastically different.
Okay.
So if we're talking about, a baby, we're really looking for that babbling if they're not babbling, right? And it's important to know too, like bilingualism exists even when they are children because they are learning and they're really receiving access to the language. So even when they're a baby, right, they're exposed to two languages. So if they're not starting to do some really simple babbling by six
Mm.
months, if they're not doing some repeated babbling like ba 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 da 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 by 9 months,
Mm.
if they don't have their first word by 12 months, and again, how we count a word is that they say it on their own. So we're not saying, say agua. We're not telling them to say it. We're not prompting
Mm.
them. They say it on their own. Every time they
Okay.
see water, they say agua. And then they say it consistently. So at least 3 times you've heard that word that they say agua, 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 throughout a short period, then we can count that word. So if by 12 months they don't have their first word, or we say if by their first birthday, right, or the end of their first
Mm.
birthday, which is that 13 months, we really want to see a first word. And then if they're
Okay.
18 months and they don't have at least 10 words, that would be, cause for some concern. And if at that
Okay.
point they're not understanding some simple directions, so like give, take out, if they're not understanding some inhibitory words like no or don't or stop. And if it seems like they're not really understanding when you ask them a question, so
Mm.
like where's your bear, if they're not kind of turning around or pointing to it, then that might be a cause for concern. And then when they're 24 months, we're really looking for at least 50 words. So by their 24 month,
Mm.
if you're counting up all their words in all their languages and they don't have at least 50 words, you can reach out to someone. And then
Mm.
if they're not starting to answer some simple question like, who is that? And they're saying,
Mm.
they're not saying like mama or dada, or like, what is that? And they're not naming things like ball. And if they're not starting to follow some simple 1 to 2 step directions, that would be when I would want you to reach out to someone. And then what does their play look like too, right? Are they playing with a variety of different toys? Are they playing with toys mostly as they're intended to be played with? And then
Mm.
kind of what are their social interactions like? Are they responding to their names? Are they starting to play with other people or play with peers? Those
Mm.
would be the real cause for concerns. But if your bilingual child is, mixing two languages, that is not, a cause for concern. Or if they don't say the word the way that the adults say it, that's not really something that we would be totally worried about.
Okay, super great.
Yeah.
Just as a very quick aside, does mama count as
Mhm.
the first word? As a word? Okay.
Of course,
Or
yeah. Often
dada?
it's like
Okay.
mom and dad are often like the most common first words for little
Okay.
ones.
Got
Yeah,
it.
and I
Okay,
also
good.
have a free a free checklist on my Instagram if you go
Okay.
into like my link in bio, and it includes a first words checklist. And I think it's like 70 of the most common first words, and mom and dad are the ones that are listed under people.
Love that. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. So now that we've kind of gotten it, okay, what would be a red flag versus not? How can we actually help
Mhm.
parents like help their kids learn two languages? So, what
Yeah.
really helps babies learn language, especially two
Mhm.
languages at once or three,
Yeah.
since they can?
Yeah. So my philosophy, which I swear by, is everyday routines and common
Mm,
interactions that are built on connection. So while your child is young, especially under their fifth birthday, we don't want to make learning feel like work for them. And it shouldn't feel like work, right? Like learning should feel like play. It should feel like connecting
mm,
with the people who they love. So anytime that you're doing anything that is routines based or anything that brings connection, reading books together. There's a flurry of bilingual, like beautiful bilingual books, but also books that are just written in the target language that
yes.
you can read with your child, which is amazing. It's really hard to be able to find
Mm-hmm.
books like in bilingual books or like in a, books in a target language or bilingual books like English, Spanish, English, Korean. Sometimes it's really tricky. And I know that it's tricky because I work with a lot of multilingual families. So I actually also created a list of like a bilingual books list that you can check out also on my
Oh,
Instagram just to make it,
amazing.
yeah, easier for families. Cause I know sometimes it's hard. And then there's rare languages too. So
Mm,
definitely if you're teaching your child another language, really focus on some routines. So when you're cooking, think of what you can name the items that you're using or like the ingredients, right? That's something really simple. And when they're going to go to bed, you can sing a song, a lullaby in your target language. And when you're playing, you can just stick to using one word or like a simple verbal routine, like up, and down, right? So you can stick to doing things that are really simple, to be very honest, or you can choose one day or one week where you're just going to focus on one word for the week or one word for the day. So like maybe we're saying goodbye to things or we're saying hello to things. So like as we're, playing a peekaboo, then we could do like peekaboo, hola mama, right? And then like put the blanket down or like close your hand or something. Or if you're walking around the neighborhood and the word is still hi, we can say hi to the birds. We can say hi to people walking by. We can say hi to
mm,
the cars. So, really doing simple things. I think where parents kind of get stuck is that they hear a lot about educational toys and educational bilingual toys, and then they kind of get stuck in a routine. So, then I'll see a lot of parents thinking that they have to do flashcards with their children.
mm,
I don't personally like flashcards because I feel like it's repetitive, it feels really academic, and then sometimes it's really hard for children to generalize a concept outside of playing with a flashcard. So you can show them a flashcard of a cow all day and tell them vaca, vaca, vaca until the cows literally come home. And then you take them to a farm and they can't tell you that that's vaca, right? Because they've learned in the
yeah.
concept of a 2D flat picture that you've showed them 100 times. So they've memorized it. They have the rote memory, but then that thing is standing right in front of them and they can't tell you what it is.
Mm,
So instead, what I say is if you do have the flashcards, don't throw them out, but find ways to bring the child's life into their everyday. So maybe take the card with you when you go to the farm, and then you guys could say, "Well, look, it's a car, it's a cow, vaca, like the ones that we look at, in the pictures." And then we
yes.
can say, "The cow says moo," or like, what do you just say, like moo, like mu with the accent, right?
Yes.
In Spanish,
Moo.
yeah, moo, yeah, right. We're
It's
talking,
like the sound is like hace moo
yeah,
or like mujer
yeah,
is the verb. But that's so interesting. Oh
yeah.
my God. That's so
Mhm.
helpful. I mean, for me, like same thing. It was very challenging for me to find things that actually help me like speak, interact and play with her in Spanish, which is obviously
Yeah,
why I created Birdsong. But but
exactly.
it's, even the books, like I went as far as there was a book I found, and it was actually made in Latin America, because the way that
Mhm.
the authors write in the target language for us is Spanish, it's just much more nuanced than if someone were to translate it, translate an English book into Spanish. Just
Yeah,
it's not always one to one, and there's a lot of like depth that's like lost when there's just translation. And so versus if the story is like conceived in Spanish, the target
mhm,
language. So I went and I found this editorial publisher, and I had to find like how to buy it in the US. And then I ended up buying it through like this platform that sells to educational like classrooms and things like that. And I was able to also buy it like as a person, but it was a lot of work for me to be able to find books in the target language from Latin America that we're
Yeah.
gonna really like explore and like teach my baby like the beauty of, the Spanish language. And so it's so hard. Like there are some bilingual books and they're great, but just it's hard to
Mhm.
also find books that are in the target language. So that's, and then to your point too, like moms, we already have so much work to do. Like it should be easy to incorporate
Right.
raising, language into your routines, into everyday. So like those moments, to your point, that like you just repeated everyday moments, connections, that goes a long way. And that's the way I've, raised my daughter bilingual so far, and so far so good. We'll see.
It's so good. Yeah, I think you're doing a
um,
great job.
but I guess my last question is, if you could leave parents with one message about raising a bilingual child, what would it be?
I guess that it doesn't have to look perfect, especially at this age. Like my population, the little friends that I work with are really kids under 5. So at this age, it doesn't have to look perfect. So it doesn't have to be the
Mm,
perfect pronunciation, or they might not always get it right, but it just matters that they're trying.
mm,
And that really raising your child to be bilingual should feel easy, especially at this age. And if it's not feeling easy, then I think it's also a matter of kind of adjusting or reflecting on what your expectations are of your child right now,
mm,
especially since if they're living in a society where, yeah, the majority language is like pretty pervasive and it's kind of hard to get around because once they go into school or once they're in their, outside of their home environment, that's all that they have access to. But really being flexible, really being patient and understanding that it will come as long as a child has access to the language, right? And they understand the language, it should come. And then, of course, there are experts that are out here to help, like Dr. Taylor Ben Yahya. She's amazing. And she's a bilingualism expert and also a researcher in the development of bilingualism and also multilingualism, right? So that is someone that you can reach out to. Not only does she know kind of the theory side of what the research
mm,
looks like, but she also knows what the application looks like because she's also raising a
mm,
bilingual toddler. So she's in it. And sometimes she'll have some bumps too, where she's kind of like navigating, trying to figure out what that looks like. But right now, I just want families to know that one, bilingualism is a gift. So no matter how
yes.
you're doing it, no matter what the journey looks like for you right now, you're doing something that is going to benefit your child, for years and decades on over. It really is a gift and it really ties them into their culture and their cultural identity. And that's a bond that you really can't break. And I feel like language is a really good way to be able to introduce and lock your child into that. Be hard. I want parents to do as much as they can. And I also don't want parents to think that they have to be fluent in a language in order to pass it on. That is something that I feel like stops a lot of families from sharing their languages. That they'll say, my grandmother used to teach it to me, but then now I just feel like I don't know it enough to pass it
Mm,
on to my child, and then that'll kind of be the end of the road for them. But I say share what you can, and I think Dr. Taylor Ben Yahya, if she was here too, she would say give what you can, right? If you only know a handful of words or you're not really sure that you're even using the right conjugation, that's okay. Just
right.
like pass on what you can, and then your child can learn the academic way of that language later on, or you can just kind of like figure it out as you go and try to access as many resources as you can. You might not feel comfortable, but maybe there's an elder in your community that can. Maybe there are some programs at your library, right, where they focus on, teaching those languages. I know my local library, they do like bilingual English Spanish book readings, and then they'll bring in someone like a music teacher. So
Mm-hmm.
there are resources around there, and there are also community centers around. So if you don't feel comfortable, there are community centers all over that might host, a language night, or they might host like a children's night. And then you can meet other families that are also going through the same experience. But then you can also meet people that you can connect your child with. And maybe you can have those people over, or maybe you can host an event where all those families come. And then okay, that'll be the way that my child has access to the language. So I think that there is lots of different ways, even if you're not feeling comfortable. And then think about how you're teaching your child, like, the majority language, English. What are you
Mm.
doing to teach them English, right? You're talking to them, you're playing with them, you're reading
Mhm.
with them, you're singing with them. It's the same concept. So don't change anything that you're doing, just now apply the target language to those same activities. And if it feels hard, like, Ashley's here, I'm here, Dr. Taylor's here, and
Yes.
you have a big
Mhm.
community of people who are willing to help you.
Yeah, this is so
Yeah.
great. Yeah, so basically talk, sing, interact with your child in English
Yeah.
and in the target language.
Yeah.
And honestly, just open the door. Open the door for them
Exactly. Just
to
start.
feel exactly feel and experience the language, and then that and it could be enough for them to then later on go on their own journey and like learn to your point academically. So
Yeah.
thank you so much. This is so
Of
great.
course.
It's like so amazing to have you. So many parents are like so excited about their bilingual journey, but it's always good to get informed on like how to do it, what the science says, and also just to get
Mhm.
some like encouragement that you are doing it right. You don't have to
Yeah.
be perfect. And it's really just those little moments that you're already sharing with your kid that are going to make the big difference in their bilingual journey as well. So
Exactly.
thank
Yeah.
you so much.
Of
And
course.
yeah, we'll continue talking, like I'm sure. And I'm excited for everyone to also find you on Instagram and hear all your thoughts and tips moving forward.
Same.
Thank you so
Thank you
much,
so much for having
Joanne.
me, Ashley, and thank you for all that you're doing at Birdsong
Oh,
too. Like,
thank you.
I
Yes.
appreciate it as an expert.
Yes, thank you. Yes, I hope
Of
that
course.
families find it useful. Exactly what you're saying. I'm trying to help moms do it easily and naturally. So,
Yeah, you're doing it.
bye, Joanne. Mwah. Thank you. Gracias.